the particular issues that has been plaguing the Department of Education lately. We were expecting it to start around 10 minutes ago. It has been a little bit late. We can see some of the members from NGO Section 27. That was Mark Hayward we have just seen stepping up and walking away. Now, pupils back in Limpopo, of course, after what has been a fairly long winter break as well. The question in Limpopo is, has the children or have the schools where the children go received their textbooks? Now, to remind you, of course, they haven't had textbooks since the beginning of this year. It was then a task team that was put together. It was led by Mary Metcalf, was sent in to audit and to double check all the figures once we were told that these books had arrived. But it was Section 27 that had taken the department to court. I think we're going to just dip in very quickly to hear what Mark Hayward from Section 27 does have to say.
That this report was going to be published today, so you weren't entirely taken by surprise. The format of this media briefing is going to be a short joint statement that will be read by Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, who you all know is the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education. The short joint statement will set out our common approach to what we might call the Metcalf report, as well as the main findings and recommendations of the Metcalf report. That will be followed by myself reading a statement by Section 27, providing our analysis of what we think is significant of this report. And that will be followed by Mr. Lesufi making a statement on behalf of the department by itself. After that, we will then be open to any questions. You should have hard copies of the report in front of you. We will make the report available electronically immediately after this press conference. And finally, I'd just like to say that Professor Metcalf is not in South Africa for the next 2 days, so you won't have any joy if you try to speak to her. I think you can contact her by email, but she's not back in South Africa until Wednesday. So you're stuck with Panyaza and myself for any sort of comment. But Mary will talk to you later. So are you happy with that approach?
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The Department of Basic Education and Section 27 today published the report compiled by Professor Mary Metcalf and her team following the investigations to verify the state of the delivery of textbooks to schools from grade 1 to 3 and grade 10 learners in Limpopo. Both parties have accepted the findings and recommendations of Professor Metcalf, which we set out below. 1, provinces ordinarily order textbook before the end of the year so that these books can be available when teaching and learning start at the beginning of the year. The Limpopo provincial government was unable to order books in 2011 for 2012 because the province had overspent its budget. 2, the Cabinet in December placed the Department of Education Limpopo under administration in 2011. 3, for a variety of reasons to be investigated by the Presidential Task Team. You will recall that the President has appointed a team to investigate the reasons for the delay in the delivery of textbook. Orders began to be placed for publishers for textbook for grade 1 and 3 and 10 learners only in the week of June 2012. The first court deadline for the delivery of those books was 15 June, and this was later extended to 27 June. The schools closed on the 22nd of June. The first books only started arriving in the central warehouse from the 7th of June 2012. More than 1 million books arrived over a 2-week period. More have arrived since, and more are expected. It will ordinarily take an estimated 6 weeks to process these books into school-based delivery lots, generate the necessary paperwork to track delivery, transport them from the central warehouse to the district of warehouses, and then deliver them to schools. 7, If the intention was to deliver the material in a 2-week period time frame, then a much more comprehensive plan was required with greater resources, capacity, infrastructure than what was made available. 8. When Section 27 and DBE met on the 28th of June to review compliance against the court order, the DBE presented figures that tracked movement of books that had at that stage been received from the central warehouse to the regional warehouses. In fact, the records of the service provider show that very few of the textbooks had reached schools at that stage. 9. The settlement between DBE and Section 27 required delivery to and receipt of books by schools by the 27th of June. This clearly didn't take place. Section 27 believed the reports it was receiving should have been about receipt by schools, while the Department of Basic Education maintains that the reports were only of dispatch to and from warehouses and they did not infer delivery to schools. 10. Whatever interpretation is accepted, both parties agree that textbooks were not in some schools by the 27th of June, as agreed in the settlement agreement. By the time delivery started to schools, they were closed for school holidays, further compounding delivery difficulties. 12. Because there was no money in the Limpopo budget for textbook, the orders have been rationalized and reduced. When books started arriving, many schools could not understand why they had not received what they had ordered. 13. Limpopo schools have the poorest communication infrastructure in the country. Communication with schools have been poor. The circular that explained this was only dispatched on the 29th of June when schools were closed. The pressure to squeeze this complex process into 2-week process caused weak systems to buggle, and a full audit of delivery could not be completed because large amounts of proof of delivery notes have not been returned. We are unable to make an accurate assessment of how many books have reached schools as yet, and we are concerned about the number of schools that report they do not have the correct books in quantity, in language, or with categories missing. Summary of recommendations. It is urgent that rapid and efficient mechanism be put into place to communicate to schools both directly and through stakeholder organizations what they should have received. To facilitate the recovery and delivery of books have been delayed by system breakdown of the non-availability of school personnel. The resources that are required to top up textbook for all grades in Limpopo at the start of the 2013 school year and to provide new textbook for all learners with the rollout of the curriculum and assessment policy statements to grade 4 and 11 in 2012 must be quantified and committed to now so that schools can be properly informed of what to expect, so that the necessary planning processes for efficient delivery can be put in place. We have confirmed that warehouses belonging to the Limpopo Department of Education has volumes of textbooks from previous years that have not been delivered. This must be audited and distributed, and an investigation must be conducted into the circumstances of. Further auditing of the delivery process will need to be undertaken. I have provided DBE with a formal report of the 2 audit companies that formed part of my team. Government reporting against orders made by the court must be double-checked for accuracy and completeness against the order, so that information provided to the executive authority for subsequent communication or compliance reporting purposes must be accurate and fully informed. That's the end of the summary of the areas, but as a joint team between ourselves and Section 27, we note that although litigation on this issue has necessarily brought the Department of Basic Education and Section 27 into conflict. And although there will continue to be challenges and disputes, including possible court action if it's not avoidable, both the Department of Basic Education and Section 27 state their full commitment to the rights of learners to basic education. We call for all stakeholders and parties to work together to achieve this end. I thank you.
Thank you, Panyaza. As we said, that is a joint statement by Section 27 and the Department of Basic Education. In essence, it is just a summary of the findings and recommendations, but a pledge on the part of both of us to continue to cooperate and work together to make sure that learners in Limpopo have proper schooling. I'm now going to just read a statement by Section 27. The basis for this statement is Section 27's understanding that the Constitution gives every single learner in this country an unqualified right to a basic education. And it is against that unqualified right to a basic education that we have to make this statement. We are aware that some of the points we make in this statement may not make Panyaza very comfortable, but that is because it is a statement issued by Section 27, drawing from the contents of the Metcalfe report. So let me read it. Section 27 and the Department of Basic Education are today releasing the verification report into the delivery of textbooks to learners in grades 1 to 3 and grade 10 in Limpopo schools. We thank Professor Metcalfe and her team. Not only have they done a great amount of work in the last 2 weeks, but they have made a personal sacrifice out of a commitment to the right to basic education. We note that the cost of this extensive investigation has been less than 300,000 rand, something we wish other organizations and individuals would emulate in the interests of the public service. And if you look at the report, you'll see that it's an 80-page report. It's involved audit firms, it's involved volunteers, it's involved 2 weeks of Professor Metcalfe's time, for which I believe she hasn't charged. It's something that has been done in the public interest and in the interest of the Constitution. At the outset, we would like to say that Section 27 has approached the Limpopo textbook crisis with a sincere intent of resolving it together with the Department of Basic Education in the interests of learners. We accept that the education crisis in Limpopo is not the minister's sole responsibility. The crisis has been long in the making and was inherited by the DBE in December 2011 when it took over the administration of the Limpopo department. Section 27's intention is not to vilify any particular person. However, we maintain our position that once the national executive, that's the cabinet, decided to intervene in Limpopo under Section 101B of the Constitution, they assumed, through the Department of Basic Education, full responsibility for meeting minimum standards for the delivery of basic education services within the province. Regrettably, because of a misconception of the powers the National Department assumes under a Section 101B intervention, instead of resolving the looming crisis facing learners, the crisis became worse, and that is exemplified, obviously, by the absence of textbooks. We then point to what we believe to be the most important findings of the report. The Gauteng North High Court originally ordered the DBE to provide textbooks on an urgent basis, commencing on 31st of May 2012 and concluding by no later than the 15th of June. That's a quote from the order of the High Court. This date was set based on the department's own commitment in court papers to meet this date. The date for delivery to schools was later extended by common agreement between ourselves to June the 27th. On the 28th of June, the DBE reported that 98% of books had been delivered. Section 27 disputed this, hence the agreement on a verification investigation. Professor Metcalfe's report shows that, in fact, on the 27th of June, only 15% of books had been delivered to schools. That's at page 17. By July the 3rd, this had increased to 48%. According to page 48 of the report, by July the 11th, that is 5 days ago, 22% of schools in the sample that Professor Metcalf looked at were still awaiting textbooks. On the first day of a new term, there is a risk, therefore, that many learners still remain without textbooks or with insufficient textbooks. We accept with the department that all these figures require further verification and draw attention of the media in particular to recommendation 8 from Professor Metcalf, which proposes further outstanding verification and corrective action to make sure that the books reach schools. But on these facts, the DBE remains in violation of the court order, and this needs very urgent remedy. The report points also to a number of other important challenges that must be overcome. The report shows that the current crisis of textbooks is not entirely new. 8.1% of schools sampled by Professor Metcalf's team reported not having received learner-teacher support materials in previous years. This affects tens of thousands of learners. The report also shows that communication to Limpopo principals and teachers by the department in Limpopo is inexcusable. Metcalf's report reveals that the first communication to schools about the non-delivery of textbooks was only made on the 17th of May. That's 5 months into the school year. In addition, it was not until June the 29th that principals were informed that they would not receive the books they had actually ordered. The Limpopo Department of Education has a dismal communication infrastructure. Only 2% of schools have access to email. That's compared to 99% of schools in the Western Cape. 23.6% have access to fax. 24.8% have access to landlines. And 71% depend upon principals' cell phones. And then we just set out our ongoing concerns. First of all, the catch-up plan. We are especially concerned that the late delivery of textbooks impedes the catch-up plan for grade 10s. Whilst the DBE files its catch-up plan with the High Court on June the 8th, the agreement with Section 27 on the 21st of June, which is now made an order of court, expanded the requirements of the catch-up plan to include additional tuition for learners and content knowledge support for teachers on an ongoing basis. The DBE is required to report on the implementation of the catch-up plan by the 30th of July. We restate the need for continued input and for full cooperation by all stakeholders, including SADTU, the Principals Association and others, in ensuring that we respect the rights and best interests of learners. Learners are not failing in education. Education is failing them. Secondly, on the budget for basic education. Professor Metcalf's report shows that the Limpopo Department of Basic Education, and this is a quote, was unable to proceed with the procurement of textbooks at the end of 2011 because the education budget for 2011-12 was exhausted before the end of 2011. That's end of quote. It is not entirely clear where the funds budgeted for textbooks at the beginning of 2011-12 went to, although it is clear that poor financial and budget management was certainly at the heart of the problem. Even so, the department should have been aware of their cash flow problems long before their budget was depleted and should have made provision for purchase of books long before the end of the year. It is obvious that the Limpopo department failed to do this. As a result of the mismanagement of the budget for textbooks in 2011-12, the recent purchase of textbooks has been from the 2012 to 2013 budget. This money would ordinarily be used for purchasing textbooks and workbooks for the 2013 academic year. It is clear from the report that next year, new CAPS textbooks will be required for grades 4 to 9 and 11, as well as top-ups for other grades. That is 7 grades as against the 4 grades this year. If provision is not made for the shortfall in the budget for these books, which must be purchased before the end of this year, 2012-13, the department will simply be deferring the current crisis to another year. The question is, where will the money necessary to overcome this budget crisis come from? We make 4 points in conclusion. A. Section 27 accepts the 16 detailed recommendations by Professor Metcalf and calls for their urgent implementation. We note that several of the recommendations do not just have a bearing on Limpopo, but on the management of textbook procurement and delivery nationally. B. It is clear from this and other reports that Limpopo Education Department is rotten, riven with corruption, and incapable of meeting its constitutional obligations to learners. We call for the department to be cleaned out, for the vigorous prosecution of charges of corruption, for maximum openness about those charged, and for the MEC for Basic Education, Dixon Masemola, to be fired. The repeated defense that there was and is no money for textbooks can no longer be accepted. The reason that resources are unavailable is due to corruption and serious mismanagement of finances. Under the Section 100 intervention, the National Department bears the duty to resolve issues of financial management, fraud and corruption, and to ensure that the amount that is budgeted for in education, which is 22.3 billion rand this year, is the amount that is received in the education system. Section 27, in conclusion, will continue to work with teachers, learners, principals and parents to monitor the education crisis in Limpopo. We will remain critical but independent of the DBE. We reserve our rights to return to court in this matter, but we will also do everything we can to assist the Minister and her team to resume the provision of basic education in Limpopo. And that ends the statement of Section 27 in response to the report. I'll now, as the final section of this press conference before questions, ask Panyaza Lesufi to read a short statement from the department in relation to the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much. As indicated earlier on, we'll confine ourselves to the joint statement that we've crafted and agreed on. But we just want to emphasize the following points. That as a department, we welcome the report by Professor Metcalf. And actually, we believe that the report adequately captures the complexities that we find ourselves in as a department when we implement Section 101B in that particular province. And this has created some difficulties and the experiences that we have noted out of this particular exercise. The department has noted the recommendations and findings of this report and will carefully consider this to ensure that the processes of procurement and distribution of LTSM in Limpopo province are strengthened. We are aware that the non-availability of school personnel during school holidays made it extremely difficult for the team to accurately verify and conclude on the matters related to audit deliveries at school level. The Department of Basic Education is committed to continue with this process of verification as requested by Professor Metcalf. We concur that more work must be done in the province to improve the entire value chain of LTSM procurement and delivery in Limpopo. The Limpopo Department has already initiated the process to ensure that textbooks for the 2013 school year are available when the schools reopen in January. The department is awaiting the reports of other task teams. You'll be aware that there are 2 other remaining task teams. So the department will await the report of those task teams, the one from the President task team as well as the Premier's task team, respectively, so that we can do work on those particular recommendations and conclude on these issues. Once this report has been received, the department will issue a comprehensive response on some of the aspects that have been identified. We want to add our voice to congratulate Professor Metcalf and the team for job well done. We really believe that the caliber of the investigation, the caliber of the work that they've done, and the interaction that they've undertaken with stakeholders in the sector set precedent for us to take over and ensure that everything is done appropriately in that particular province. So welcome the report and therefore commit ourselves to implement all its findings and ensure that we work together with our partners, especially Section 27, to deal with this particular aspect and conclude on those things. There are 1 or 2 things that I want to emphasize from our side as the Department of Basic Education. One is that based on some of the recommendations, we've already moved with speed to make an implementation of some of the recommendations. As I'm speaking to you now, where we are instituting a head count of all learners in Limpopo, as well as all educators in Limpopo. This is very important for us to verify the number of learners and the number of educators so that we can have the necessary quality information that can ensure that we don't find ourselves in the processes that we find ourselves in. Secondly, the ministers go into Limpopo to engage with stakeholders on the basis of the report and also verify and get the recommendations implemented in that particular province so that there's no delay of some of the work that need to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Thirdly, which is the last aspect, that the catch-up plan that we want to implement without any further delay. We've finalized the budgeting of it now. We've got the necessary budget, and we believe that after consultation with stakeholders in that particular province and the report that will table to court on the 30th of July, it will outline all the work that needs to be done in that particular province. We are ready to take questions if there are questions that need to be.
Thank you very much, Panyaza. We have 10, maximum 15 minutes for questions, so if people could just identify yourself, your question, and the person to whom you are asking the question. Thanks very much.
Hi, it's Jody from E-News. My question is directed to Panyaza. With regards to that page 17 in the report, we were here at a press conference in this very building when it was reported that almost all the textbooks, if not almost 100% of the textbooks, had been delivered. Now we've got the Metcalf report in front of us, which basically says that that was not the case, and that there's a dispute between what the figures that you guys gave us on that day. I mean, let's just say that everywhere you look the next day and on that day in terms of media reports, 98% of the textbooks had been delivered to Limpopo.
Let's go
Was that a lie?
No, it was not. Let's go to recommendation 15 in the report that we've just read. And I want you to read that recommendation 15, if you don't mind. There's a report by the team of Professor Metcalf. We are unable to make an accurate assessment of how many books have reached schools as yet, and we are concerned about the number of schools that they report that they do not have the correct books in quantity. So the report indicates that they are unable, and there is a slide in the report of the schools that they could not verify. So it will really be jumping the gun when the report itself, and I'll go to summary number 19 of the report. It says further auditing of the delivery process needs to be undertaken. It's not conclusive. It said further auditing needs to be conducted. So if the report say they are unable to make a conclusive to say how many books were delivered, and it also requires that we need to further audit, and something that we've accepted. We said in discussion both with things that we don't want to reopen who must do what, who must not do what. What we need to do is to ensure that every learner has a textbook. And that's the part that we're committing ourselves in.
So can I just get a follow-up question? So where did you get those figures of that day, the 98% and the 100%?
I'm saying those figures, we still stand on them. The only interpretation that we had, and we didn't want to go at that particular level, which is the key aspect that have been outstanding about the two parties. The only interpretation was that those books are indeed in the schools or have left the warehouse for the schools. And the software that was utilized to capture those particular information, it was the books that were going to the schools on the basis of them leaving the central warehouse to the district warehouse and to the schools. And if we can check of the report of Mary as well, it indicates the number of returns, that is proof of delivery notes, that they have received and verified. And at that stage, they were at 72% when they wrote the particular report. So where we are, we want to give the team space to further investigate, to further verify, and we'll give them all the necessary cooperation that they request out of us.
You can come back in a minute, okay? Right at the front, lady. Yeah.
Rahima Essa from Eyewitness News.
Yes.
By July 11th, which was last week, 22% of schools didn't have textbooks as yet, according to the report. When will those textbooks be delivered is the new term. When can you assure those learners that they will get textbooks?
Let me rectify you first. It's 22% of the sample. It's not 22%. And I'm saying the report, if you go to the report, it's just unfortunate that we're giving the report now and we are going through it when we had never maybe had an opportunity to go through it. Where we are, We don't want to enter a blame game. We don't want to enter who must do that. We have to ensure that there are textbooks at schools. And we've managed to get 92% of all the delivery notes, which are the proof of delivery that we need to show to South Africans, to say these are the proofs that we have that will deal with those particular aspects. So I don't want to prejudge to jump. The team recommends that further verification must be done, and I want to leave it at that particular stage. We will do further verification and provide all the necessary support that is needed.
1, 2, 3. Okay, that gentleman, yeah, and then next the back, and then Nonkosi, and then...
Well, the media briefing, it was a joint statement by Section 27 and the Education Department. We're having questions at the moment. Panyaza Lessufi, Department of Basic Education, is busy answering some of those. Just to briefly recap, the Basic Education Department saying well done to Professor Metcalf for her work. They now say the catch-up plan, according to their budgets, that they've now found the money for from somewhere, is going to begin on July 30th. Section 27 coming out to say that June 27th was agreed upon for textbooks to be delivered. At the time, the department said 99% had been delivered. They are querying this. They're saying it's incorrect. By July 3rd, which is about a week after the due date, only 48% of books had been delivered. They blame poor financial management back in 2011, saying that the current purchase of textbooks is in fact out of the 2013 budget. So the textbooks which were not delivered beginning of this year is simply got to do with a financial mismanagement case back last year. The money was never made available for it. Questions now being asked, where has that money actually gone? And also Section 27 going on to say that next year, 7 grades in total are going to be needing books, asking the Education Department, where is that money going to come from? But ultimately, in the joint statement by the Basic Education Department and Section 27, they are unable to, at the moment, provide a complete report. They are still waiting for more numbers to come in.